Namaste. Hello friends. Today I'll speak about the ancient Indian roots of major Native American cultures. First of all, let me express my deep gratitude to the Swami Vivekananda Kendra Kanyakumari and Swami Vivekananda Prabodhini Mumbai for giving me this opportunity to speak at their celebrated forum impacting the country and the world for propagation of ancient Indian knowledge and wisdom. I congratulate the Prabodhini for organizing this lecture series on the occasion of the 75th years of our country's independence. Friends, culture is like a stream. Its flow is continuous. As it goes further in time, it adopts new ideas and adapts itself to the changes. However, even as it changes in its outer form, it sticks to the values it preaches, consequent customs, traditions, rituals, religious philosophy, forms of worship, and the dharma. Vedic Hindu culture is the oldest culture in the world. We all know that. The way of life and the value it teaches us is the Hindu Dharma. Recent research is showing that the Mahabharata period is 7,000 years old, Ramayana 14,000, and the Vedic period is 21,000 years old. The greatness of our Vedic Hindu culture lies in the fact that though there are different cultures in the world, most of their ideas, beliefs, and their way of life seem to have emanated from the ancient Vedic Hindu culture. In this lecture, I am presenting the sum total of my personal visits, observations, and my interactions with three different major Native American cultures, namely the Aztecs, the Mayas, and the Incas. These cultures have attracted a large section of scholars, yet very little is said about their relation with the most ancient Vedic Indian culture and their links and their possible roots in ancient India. They are very obvious to the common man who visits Mexico, Guatemala, and Peru, which are the main centers where these cultures grew. The Aztec, Maya, and Inca culture are sadly the world's lost cultures today. But the Hindu culture and the Dharma is still alive and growing. Hence, the purpose of this speech is to make the scholars and students aware of these hitherto unknown links of the Vedic Hindu Dharma with them. We all know that real research requires refutable scientific evidence. Therefore, from this distinguished forum, I wish to show the roots, links, and I want to urge the scholars to use these links as internal evidence for intensive research in this subject. Friends, in 1940, Chamanlal published a book, Hindu America, which traces the similarities between the pre-Columbian American cultures and that of the Indians. Chamanlal states that the Indians were the first to reach America and that India, that is Bharat, is the mother of the ancient Aztec and Maya civilizations. Chamanlal brought together many interesting parallels between the culture of the Amerindians and the Indians. His book has a foreword from none other than Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the first president of India. The Native American kingdoms, especially the Aztec, the Maya, and the Inca, were highly developed cultures with remarkable affluence comparable only to ancient India. As per available records, the Indians were not only aware of the existence of the American continent, they also had navigational links with the kingdoms of Native America. Chamanlal identifies Quetzalcoatl, the arch preceptor of the Aztecs, as the Indian sage Aztec who gave political asylum to the Nagas in Patala, which is today's America. The name Aztec explains Aztlan. In the language of the Aztecs, Nahuatl, the suffix tlan means the Sanskrit sthana, that is place. Thus, Aztlan means the place of Aztec. The European scholars, starting from Bernardino de Sahagun, have called them ʻæztɛks. This clearly indicates the role of the sage Aztec in the creation of the Aztec civilization. Scholars differ in their opinion about the time the Aztecs entered America, but they all agree that those people had an eastern origin. The ancient Indian scriptures give us an account of the world's geography of those times. Now, in what ways was the ancient Aztec Empire connected to India? According to the Bhagavata, the most venerated old Hindu scripture, in its volume 10, chapter 23, says the earth was divided in 7 lokas at that time. These were called Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala. Of these, as is generally believed, Patala was an American continent. Indian mythology makes frequent allusions to Indians, Hindus, visiting Patala, and it shows that ancient India had navigational links with America. The Ramayana gives us the story of the demon king of Sri Lanka, Ravana, who went to Patal after being defeated by Vishnu. It has been confirmed by Principal Ramdeva of the Gurukul University, who says that the Mexico legends and the Indian legend are closely connected. He says so in his book Bharat Ka Itihas on page 342. The detailed descriptions of the kingdom of Mayasura, the empire of the Mayas, is also available. Indian mythology makes frequent allusions to people visiting Patala after a journey through water. Arjuna, the Pandava prince, travelled to Patala. There he married the Naga princess Ulupi. Mayasura, the super architect, was summoned to build the capital and especially the Maya Sabha by Yudhishthira, the Pandav king. King Janmejaya, the son of King Parikshit, the descendant of the Pandava dynasty, had vowed to destroy all the Nagas because he feared death at their hands. The Nagas must have fled to Patal, where the sage Aztec secured political asylum for them. Chamanlal travelled to Mexico and has given us a similar hypothesis. This hypothesis is further reinforced by the social, religious similarities and supported by archaeological findings. Moreover, Professor Singhal, in his monumental work India and World Civilization, has reported the findings of some geographers that in ancient times a unidirectional current like the Gulf Stream flowed from Southeast Pacific towards the American continent, and that it is quite likely that people of what is referred to as Greater India, who were avid voyagers, set sail on this stream and never came back. Baron Alexander von Humboldt, an eminent European scholar anthropologist, was one of the first to postulate the Asiatic origin of the Indian civilizations of the Americans. Dr. Robert Hayne Gilden, anthropologist, has also written that those who believe The ancient people of Asia were incapable of crossing the ocean, have completely lost sight of what the literary sources tell us concerning their ships and their navigation. The influences of the Indian Buddhist culture of Southeast Asia in Mexico, and particularly among the Maya, are incredibly strong, and that they have already disturbed some Americanists who don't like to see them but cannot deny them. Humboldt further adds that, and I quote, ships that could cross the Indian Ocean were able to cross the Pacific too. Moreover, these ships were really larger and probably more seaworthy than those of Columbus. The evidence for the earliest migrations into the Americas is scarce and usually not clear. However, these scholars agreed that the Aztec culture is not autochthonous and that these people had an eastern origin. I quote, ships that could cross the Indian Ocean were able to cross the Pacific too. Moreover, these ships were really larger and probably more seaworthy than those of Columbus and Magellan. Unquote. There is only one answer. They might have the same origin. Now, let us look at the examples in detail. My first and foremost example is the Aztecs. The Aztecs of Mexico were the greatest victims of European colonization. America as such did not exist before Columbus discovered it. It was the land of the American aborigines, he labeled as Red Indians. Santa Maria, the now in which Columbus sailed, reached America on October 12, 1492. He saw the brown-colored original inhabitants of the land and named them Red Indians, and the name stuck. In post-Columbian era, shiploads of Europeans descended on this new land in search of gold. The imperialistic attitude of scorn for these barbarous savages slowly changed into that of wonder and surprise. The Aztecs of Mexico have long attracted scholars, admirers, and historians from all over the world. Aztec culture and Aztec art have roused the curiosity of many a soldier, archaeologist, ethnologist, anthropologist, linguist, astronomers, astrologists in the post-Columbian era. Every new discovery revealed by the Aztec and Mayan and Incan ruins adds to our knowledge of the natives of the American continent and their culture. As the reports of the fabulous treasures which abounded the native states filtered through Europe, the process of colonization started. The Spanish robbed the Amerindians of their wealth and sought to destroy their culture. Octavio Paz, in his book The Light of India, he was a famous poet laureate, Nobel Prize winner, and the former ambassador to India. He has noted down the similarities in the culture of India and Mexico. Octavio Paz says, and I quote, in Mexico, the Spaniards encountered history as well as geography. That history is still alive. It is a present rather than a past. The temples and gods of pre-Columbian Mexico are a pile of ruins now. But the spirit that breathed life into that world has not disappeared. It speaks to us in the hermetic language of myth, legends, forms of social coexistence, popular art, customs. Unquote. These similarities formed the subject of my first book, Indo-Aztec cultural affinity, followed by another book, Indo-Aztec Dharma. Now, let us see the Aztec story. The Aztec culture is the culture of the ancestors of the people of Mexico, called the mestizos today. The origin of the Aztecs is still a mystery, but there is no doubt as to the high state of evolution and development they had reached. Destroyed by the Spanish conquistadores in the first half of the 16th century, the glory of the Aztec nation now exists only in history books, albeit metamorphosed. As one reads about the Aztec culture, one becomes increasingly aware of the resemblance between that culture and the culture of India, that is Bharat. Social and cultural similarities between the two cultures are remarkable. Even more pronounced are the similarities between their respective religions, or more precisely, between the two dharmas. The Aztecs were simple, God-fearing people. Religious festivals and celebrations made their life vibrant and colorful. Thus, in many ways, their life and religious philosophy was similar to that of the Indians. Post-Columbian Spaniards and European scholars were unable to conceive of diversity of Aztec life. They failed to invent cultural toleration to go along with it. They naturally looked at the Amerindians from the European point of view. Hence, whatever they could not comprehend was dismissed as barbarian and devilish. What they could not understand is easily comprehensible to the common man in the eastern part of the world and especially India. Hernando Cortes, the Spanish conquistador, reached Mexico in 1512. By 1522, the Spanish conquest of Mexico was complete. The indigenous population was either killed or converted to Christianity. Cortes had ruined the temples in obvious contempt of idolatry and burned and destroyed all religious scriptures and valuable records as devil's work. Mass conversions followed. Indigenous Mexican cultures, the Aztec, the Mayas, and the Incas, other civilizations became a matter of history. Cortes committed genocide of Aztec race. All remaining Aztecs were taken in a procession and publicly shot. Post-conversion Mexicans are now called mestizos, a mixed breed of Spanish and native blood. Now about the conquest. Europe saw the Aztec Empire through the eyes of Cortes and Bernardino de Sahagun, who accompanied Cortes in the conquest of Mexico. From various places in Mexico, renamed Aztec nation as New Spain, Cortes sent 5 letters to the Spanish emperor in which he has ruthlessly described the massacre of the thousands of Amerindians at Cholula, the burning of 400 chieftains after the insurrection in Panuco, the cutting of the hands of 50 more people. Yet this man claimed in his letters that he is religious. Cortes used the sword to spread and preach the gospel. His imperialistic attitude is predominantly present in all his descriptions of the Aztec land and the people. Another, more authentic and first-hand information of the life of the pre-conquest Aztecs can be had from the 12-book General History of Things in New Spain by Bernardino de Sahagun. Father Sahagun has given us a realistic picture of Aztec life without ever trying to dramatize it as Cortes did. What is more important is that he has given us the Aztec version of the conquest. The Spanish conquest of the Aztec civilization was prepared with the help of local Nahuatl scholars. Nahuatl was the original language of the Aztecs. William Bancroft, in his History of Mexico, has mentioned that Nahuatl was a perfectly grammatical and compressed language like Sanskrit. Sahagun's book was suppressed and was eating dust for 150 years till it was finally published. The world was shocked to read the Spanish brutalities. Sahagun's book is the most complete chronicle of pre-conquest Aztec life. He interpreted native books to document Aztec religion, literature, art, medical practices, jobs, skills, botany, zoology, and mineralogy. The credit of bringing the truth to light undoubtedly goes to Sahagun, a Christian missionary. When Cortes reached Mexico, he was astonished to see the temple of Quetzalcoatl in Mexico. He had a desire to see the fabulously rich Aztec kingdom of Moctezuma the king. It was on 8th November 1519 that Cortes rode on horseback, followed by an army of 4,000, of whom only 700 were Spaniards. He marveled at the mechanical art of the Aztecs as they rode over the stone causeway in the famous glittering city of Tenochtitlan. The mechanical precision and the construction and solidity of the city of Tenochtitlan surprised him. They also saw several large towns resting on piles and reaching far into the water. They saw the busy market, buzzing with activity, where almost every article of use was bought and sold. He was fascinated by the Aztec display of gold. What follows is the history of religious invasion, the tyranny of the landlords, and the suffering of the half-breed Aztecs who were pushed into serfdom on the plantations built on their land and on their backs. The rape of the Aztec nation was complete. Today, descendants of the fourth generation Aztecs still exist in the valley of Anahuac in Mexico. These Aztecs still occupy the valley of Mexico, the ancient Anahuac, and overflow into the adjacent states. They are naturally the most mixed in blood and in most acculturated of all Amerindian breeds. The purest Aztec culture, including language Nahuatl, is found in the state Morelos, notably in villages like Tepoztlan and Ятепек, where the pre-conquest Nahuatl is still habitually used. The modern Aztecs are an industrious people, frightfully poor in some localities, such as the valley of Tenochtitlan, where only a small number of population have a land of their own. Let me show you some pictures which bring out the Indo-Aztec similarity. Now let's look at the similarities between the two societies, that is, the Aztecs and the Vedic Hindus. When Europe was still in the woods, the Aztec and the Indian civilization was at their peaks. They were living in fine marble palaces and had stately temples. The descendants of these original Vedic Indians are now known as Hindus. Both the Hindus and the Aztecs were simple, peace-loving, honest, uncorrupt, religious people. They had strict moral laws, efficient and effective political systems, and a just judiciary that did not accept bribe. They were rich nations which abounded in gold. India was called the Golden Bird, and Mexico was El Dorado for Cortes. Their fabulous treasures attracted mercenary Europeans who looted their wealth and impoverished them. They have similar physical features and they look alike, as we can see in the picture. As we can see in the title page images, the Aztec calendar devised by Quetzalcoatl looks similar to the Hindu Panchang. Much research by experts is needed in this regard. Like the Hindus, the Aztecs were city planners par excellence. The plan of the city of Tenochtitlan is an example. There are great similarities in the social structures and social rules, the code of conduct followed by the two. The Aztecs followed the Chaturvarna Vyavastha of the society. There are many more striking similarities between these two cultures. Now let's look at them one by one. Now, religion. The Aztecs were a superstitious people. In the Aztec religion, several gods ruled over their daily life. Some of them were Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess, Tlaloc, the rain god, and Quetzalcoatl, the inventor of Aztec writing and their calendars. There is a glaring resemblance between the Indian religion and that of the Aztecs. The Aztec pantheon is very similar to the Vedic gods of the Indians. The Aztec temples, like the Indian temples, face the rising sun. The most important Latin American god is Tonatiuh. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, is depicted as part bird, part snake, and often with human features. This is similar to Garuda, the eagle carrier of Lord Vishnu. Garuda is a natural killer of the serpents. Now about the mythology. Mythology is the cultural treasure of mankind. It throws light on human development and history in different parts of the world. Mythological similarities are therefore the internal evidences to prove the connecting links between cultures and peoples. The Aztec myths depended on word of mouth, although some were recorded in codices. The stories were often sung and accompanied by drums. Often there were mask-wearing dancers, mask pantomime on stage, props. This tradition is similar to the Indian tradition of Rama Leela, which gave a musical presentation of the epic Ramayana. Now about the gods and goddesses. The object of both the Indian and Aztec religion was to attract favorable forces and to mollify those unfavorable to them and to the whole of mankind. So they personified nature in the form of God. The Indians and the Aztecs had a great imagination which allowed them to conceptualize and worship nature in all its aspects. Like all pre-Christian cultures, the Indian and the Aztecs created a number of deities which they worshipped. Both had a representative deity for the good as well as the evil and the ferocious aspect of nature. All these deities were manifestations of one single omniscient and omnipresent spirit, which the Indians called Brahma, and the Native Americans call him Ser Supremo. This supreme reality, they felt, cannot be presented in any form inasmuch as it transcends all form and directions. It has neither beginning nor end. Both the Aztecs and the Indians have the concept of the divine couple emerging out of this deity. The Aztecs call them Tonacioatli and Tonacioatl, and the Indians call them Prakriti and Purusha. The Aztec and Maya in Mexico, the cradle of civilization of America, they are supposed to have received most of their deities from India. In any case, there are striking similarities in the Aztec and the Indian deities. Originally, both the Aztecs and the Indians believed in the supreme being called Brahma in Sanskrit and Teotl in Nahuatl. Now, let's look at the concept of Trinity. This supreme reality, both the Aztecs and the Indians felt, could not be represented in any form as much as it transcends all form and direction. It has neither beginning nor end. The Indians call it Paramatma or the Brahman, the creator of the universe, and his Aztec counterpart is Teotl. It has the prime sound of Om in it, which to the Indians symbolize the origin of the universe. Teotl is a compound of Om and Teo. In Sanskrit, the parallel word for Teo is Deo. With climatic variations, T becomes D and it is perfectly understandable. Theokalli is the Aztec goddess. For the Indians, she is the divine mother, Deo Kali. Here again, Theo is Deo, Kalli is Kali. This is an example of the glaring similarity between the two religions. Also, there is Koyolakki. Lakki actually means Lakshmi. The other two primary deities worshipped by Aztecs are Huitzilopochtli and Tezcatlipoca. While Tezcatlipoca was the creator, Tlaloc, the god of water, was the sustainer or the preserver. Huitzilopochtli was the war god, the destroyer. His image greatly resembles that of Shiva, given in the Shiva Kavacha. The description of the idol of Tezcatlipoca in the temple at Tenochtitlan matches the description of Lord Vishnu, the preserver. The Indian trinity of Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesha also represented exactly similar functions of these three deities. The Indian prayers to Lord Vishnu and the translated Nahuatl Aztec prayer have same epithets, similar eulogy as the stotras in Sanskrit sung to please God with prayer and in turn get his blessings. About the similarities in gods and goddesses, I have written in detail in my book Indo-Aztec Cultural Similarity and Indo-Aztec Dharma, giving examples from Indian scriptures as well as Aztec codices. Now, what surprises us is Quetzalcoatl. I always wonder who this Quetzalcoatl was. No doubt he went there from the east and gave the Aztecs their own civilization, their own way of life. Quetzalcoatl is the legendary hero who was the Aztec arch preceptor. Quetzalcoatl gave the Aztecs a way of life and improved their standard of living. Quetzalcoatl taught the Aztec the value of austere and virtuous life, to sacrifice no man or beast at the altar, but to give mild offerings of bread and flowers and perfumes and to do penance. Quetzalcoatl taught them science and the calendar and devised ceremonies. He discovered corn and all the good aspects of civilization. Quetzalcoatl comes closest to the sage Aztec. Aztec was the son of the sage Jaratkaru and the sister of the Naga Takshaka. Aztec is similar to Quetzalcoatl because, like Quetzalcoatl, he also talked to his mother before his birth from her womb. There is a place called Texcoco in Mexico. The name is the same as Takshaka. The name Aztec also explains Aztlan. Tlan in Nahuatl and Sthan in Sanskrit. Thus, Aztlan means the place of Aztec. The Vishnu Purana, an ancient Indian scripture, talks of the 7 lokas. Aztec literature also refers to the land as Pantala. Thus, there is a possibility that Quetzalcoatl was actually Aztec rishi. The Spanish called them æztɛks. Quetzalcoatl was heavily bearded like an Indian sage. The Aztec people thought Cortes was an incarnation of Quetzalcoatl returning from the east to retake his land, as told in legend. Because when Quetzalcoatl left those people, he promised them that he will come back. So they thought that it is Quetzalcoatl who has come back in the form of Cortes. They welcomed Cortes with great reverence, thus facilitating the Spanish entry in the Aztec Empire. Finally, legend has it that the Aztec priests often performed human sacrifices. The only written accounts of these sacrifices are by either Hernán Cortés, the conquistador, or by his historian Bernal Diaz del Castillo. Taking into account the absolute lack of moral code whatsoever on the part of Cortés, it seems very possible that he lied about the Aztecs in order to justify his murderous conduct with them. It is also possible that what Cortés witnessed was not human sacrifice, but was rather the Aztec form of the death penalty ordered by the king to the evildoers. In these sacrifices, it is possible that the usual victims were prisoners of war. And what better place than a temple can there be to finally execute them? Since Cortés did not see more than several of these sacrifices, the latter possibility is quite likely. At that time, Cortés' knowledge and understanding of the Aztec culture was not nearly enough to tell whether those sacrificed were prisoners of war that were being sacrificed to the gods, or whether they were men who were sentenced to cruel death due to some crimes that they had committed, such as murder. The Aztecs were simple, God-fearing, credulous, and gullible people. They did not possess the cunningness of the invaders. They were led to believe that whatever good or bad happens is the will of providence. Their own prophecies also affected them and made them nervous. The Spanish gave them a bad name, called them the children of Saturn, who indulged in human sacrifices, which were less cruel than the atrocities done to them by Cortés. But the stigma was, and is still being, hyped. Go to any Google account and you will see plenty of pictures of human sacrifices supposed to have been done by the Aztecs. You type Aztec on Google and you will find numerous pictures depicting brutal, nauseating drawings of human sacrifice, especially when the Aztecs are not there anymore to defend themselves. Let us remember, Cortés did not carry a camera. Let us undertake an intensive research to find out the veracity of this serious allegation. Let us rewrite Aztec history. It's our duty. Thank you. Thank you very much.